All right, and we are back here on the GSMC football podcast. And for the second part of the show, we are going to now get into talking about the Chiefs Chargers game from last night. Chiefs picking up the win 19-17. And you could call me salty, whatever you want, but I do think the Chiefs this year are the luckiest team in the NFL. I really do believe that because of the amount of wins that these wins, these one score games, that they just find a way to get the win. And look, they're 12-1. You got to give them credit. But so many of these wins, one score games, and again, you go back to the first few weeks of the season. Isaiah Likely's toe is out of bounds. His foot is out of bounds. The Bengals, you win on a game-winning field goal. The Falcons, you stop them on fourth down. Some, penalties or non-calls late in those games, but, you win that. You beat the Chargers by a touchdown. Against the Bucks, you get the ball in overtime, and you go right down the field and you score, and you win that game. You win on a blocked field goal. You win on a game-winning field goal against the Panthers. You win on a bobbled snap against the Raiders last week, and then you win on a field goal that hits off the upright, and it doesn't come back in. It goes through to win the game. Not like it was a double doink with the Bears. Sorry, Bears fans, didn't mean to bring that up. But they just are always on the winning side of things. Now, talking about it last night with my friends, exchanging texts after the game, and I've said this on the show too, it could just be one of those things where they could just be going through the motions. They're stacking up these wins, and then when you get to the playoffs, they're going to flip that switch, and they're going to be that Kansas City Chiefs team that we know they can be. However, now that could happen, but they do have some problems. And one major problem is the offensive line. Now, both quarterbacks took hits last night. Justin Herbert had to leave the game briefly because of a hit that he took in the game. And, you feared the worst because it took some time for him to get up. But he was able to come back in. And the Chargers, they were down 13-0. They took the lead at one point. So it was good to see that Herbert was able to come back in. But Patrick Mahomes was taking some big hits last night. You can't have that happen. You cannot have that happen. They have to do a better job at protecting him, because if he gets hurt, then this conversation doesn't mean anything. And Patrick Mahomes has gotten hurt in the playoffs, but he was able to battle through it, and that was when they played the Eagles in the Super Bowl. When he had that high ankle sprain, it didn't matter. They still were able to win. But that's one thing, and that's what hurt them in the Super Bowl against the Bucks, is their inability to protect Patrick Mahomes, and he was running for his life that entire time. So we'll see if they're able to fix that, but it's a problem. It is definitely a problem. But the Chiefs, having said that, they still find a way to win. And they're 12-1. We talked about the Bills in the last segment. Them and the Steelers are tied at 10-3. They're 2 games behind the Chiefs for home field advantage. And the Chiefs just keep finding ways to win. And I don't know if they're going to lose another game in the regular season. They do have, these are their next 4 games. They got the Browns coming up in Cleveland. Now, we'll see who the starting quarterback is, because Kevin Stefanski, his comments after the game yesterday, after their loss to the Steelers, he didn't seem like he committed to Jameis Winston. So we could see a new quarterback for the Browns, whether it's, I guess it would be DTR, right? So we'll keep an eye on that. Then they got the Texans at home, and the Texans have taken a step back this year, but, Joe Mixon in that running game, you got Nico Collins and Tank Dell you got to worry about. So we'll see what happens with that game. Then the game on Christmas against the Steelers in Pittsburgh. Really looking forward to that game. We'll see what happens there. And then you got the Broncos. Now, maybe the Broncos are still going to have something to play for, because, or maybe they could be locked into whatever wild card spot they're in, Or maybe the Chiefs rest their starters. Who knows? But we'll see what happens. It's a tough end to the schedule, but I don't know. The Chiefs just always find ways to win games. So to kind of go through it, on their first drive, they scored 3 points. A lot of punts. It was 13-0 going into the half. They had a touchdown to DeAndre Hopkins late in the first half. 9-yard touchdown. And, I just saw no J.K. Dobbins. There was no Ladd McConkey last night for the Chargers. He was ruled out for the game. He was he was questionable going into the contest, but he ended up getting ruled out. So the Chargers were shorthanded. And there was a couple of times in the first half where, if the Chargers would have connected on a big play, they would have had points in the first half. There was, some deep shots to Joshua Palmer that were missed. There were drops. It's just the Chargers, they're still a year away from being a legit, I guess you could say Super Bowl contender, right? Because you got Harbaugh there. You got the quarterback. The defense has played better this year. But they need to surround Justin Herbert with more weapons. And I think you do that. I wouldn't put them in that upper echelon of Super Bowl contenders, but they'd be right there. Because I do think Harbaugh he's already turned this team around. So they're going to have to get some better playmakers. T. Higgins is a name that's popped up. But, yeah. So, anyways, as my camera, don't know what just happened here. But, anyway, so the Chargers actually did open up the second half with a 13-play, 79-yard drive. They get down the field, and Gus Edwards scores from 3 yards out. So that made it 13-7. Then the Chiefs punted. Chargers then scored another touchdown. You had Herbert connect with Quentin Johnston for a 4-yard touchdown. That made it 14-13. Chiefs then responded with the field goal drive of their own. Matthew Wright from 50 yards out. And then the Chargers put together an 8.5-minute drive almost. And that led to a Cameron Dicker 37-yard field goal. So that put them up 17-16. And then the Chiefs, they got into field goal range. And Matthew Wright kicks a 31-yard field goal, which, like I said, it hits off the upright, and then it still goes in. It deflects in. Doesn't come back onto the field, it goes in. Because that's just the kind of year the Chiefs are having, where they're just on the winning side of all these games. So, again, give them credit. They're 12-1. But it's kind of like the 2020 Steelers, where you're sitting there going, how does this team have this record? This good of a record right now? But again, they could be fooling us like last year where, yeah, there's no way they're going to win the Super Bowl this year the way their offense has been playing. And then they flip that switch and they go on and win another Super Bowl. So we'll see what happens. Patrick Mahomes went 24-37 for 210 yards. He had a touchdown, no interceptions, was sacked 3 times. Isaiah Pacheco, 55 yards on the ground on 14 carries. Travis Kelce, their leading receiver, 5 receptions for 45 yards. Xavier Worthy, 5 for 41. DeAndre Hopkins, 4 for 32 and a touchdown. Juju Smith-Schuster, 2 for 31. Noah Gray, 4 for 26. Chiefs defense, 3 sacks on the night of Justin Herbert, who finished 21 of 30 for 213 yards, a touchdown, no interceptions. Chargers only ran the ball for 94 yards. Gus Edwards was had 36 yards on the ground and a touchdown. Kamani Vidal, he had 34 yards on the ground as well. Justin Herbert, 12 yards rushing. Taylor Heineke had to come in briefly. He had a 12-yard run. Joshua Palmer was their leading receiver, 6 receptions for 78 yards. Stone Smart, 3 receptions for 54 yards. Quentin Johnston, 5 for 48 and a touchdown. And 3 sacks by the Chargers defense. And, yeah, they dropped to 8-5. Chiefs improved to 12-1. Right now you got 3 8-5 teams occupying the AFC wildcard spots. You got the Ravens, the Chargers, and the Broncos. And then you got the Colts and the Dolphins. They're both 6-7. Bengals are 4-8. They need to win tonight at least somewhat keep their playoff hopes alive. But it's actually amazing. I was very optimistic about a lot of teams finishing with, not like, finishing over 500, but finishing with, somewhat decent records. But, yeah, I mean, you got the Bengals at 4-8. Then you got, 5 3-10 teams in the AFC? You got the Browns at 3-10. You got the Jaguars at 3-10, the Jets at 3-10, the Titans at 3-10, the Patriots at 3-10, and then you got the Raiders at 2-11. A lot of bad football teams this year. And then over in the NFC, you got the Giants who are 2-11. They, lose another game yesterday to the Saints. Panthers are 3-10, but the Panthers are 3-10 team that actually has looked better as of late. I mean, you only lost to the Eagles by a touchdown. And, it looked like they scored the potential game-tying touchdown, but I think it was Xavier Legette, but the ball ended up hitting the ground. We'll talk about that game tomorrow as well. But, yeah, a lot of bad teams this year. But, yeah, I mean, I had the Browns at 10 wins this year. I had the Jaguars at 9. I had the Titans at 6. The Jets I had at 11 wins. That's the most disappointing out of really all these teams. The Raiders I had at 8 wins. I mean, I thought the Raiders were going to finish around the same record they did last year. But, then they traded Devontae Adams, and, they can't run the football. The quarterbacks, Aiden O'Connell now got hurt. So now it looks like Desmond Ridder might be the starter going into next week's game. But, yeah, just a lot of teams with bad records this year. And, right now, the Giants and the Raiders are tied record-wise. Giants still have the edge for the number 1 overall pick. I really don't see how the Giants win another game this year. But you never know. I thought for a moment they were going to win yesterday, but that didn't happen. So, yeah, a lot of bad teams this season. But back to this game, Chargers, they're going to make the playoffs. I just thought no J.K. Dobbins, no Ladd McConkey, they were going to struggle, and they did. But, it was a winnable game for them, and they just fell a little bit short. And their last 4 games, they got the Buccaneers, they got the Broncos, the Patriots, and the Raiders. So these next 2 games are going to be tough for them. They are at home, and then the following 2 games are against the Patriots and the Raiders. So they're going to finish around 10 wins this season, 10, 11 wins. And I had them at 9, and it looks like they're, I think they're going to get into the playoffs, barring a huge collapse, which I don't think is going to happen with this team. The Broncos-Chargers game is going to be interesting because the Broncos are playing better. The Chargers, beat them the last time, so I'm curious to see how the rematch goes. I think the Ravens are ultimately going to finish with the top wild card spot. They still got a shot at the division. We'll see. And then as for the Chiefs, they got a tough finish to the schedule, but it looks like they're probably going to finish with the number 1 seed. So we'll keep an eye on all that as we move along here towards the end of the final, few weeks of the season. We are going to take our next break. Before we do that, I just want to remind you guys once again to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. It makes the show more lively and more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate your guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So when we come back from our next break, we will talk about the Jets officially being eliminated from playoff contention after yet another loss, this time to the Dolphins in overtime. We'll get into that when we return. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.